by the time they're 18, you've spent 90% of the time you're ever going to spend with them. And you only got 10% left for the whole balance of their life, of your life with theirs. And so how are you engaged in that 90%? Are you engaged?
Welcome to Girl Dad Nation. In this episode, I welcome Shawn Nelson. Shawn is the CEO and founder of Lovesac company, and Lovesac is celebrating their 25 years. And I wanted to have Shawn on the show because I just listened to his audiobook, Let Me Save You 25 Years, detailing his journey with the Lovesac company. So yeah, let's get to it. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So I just got through your audiobook. I love audiobooks and podcasts because I like to, as one of your concepts is work in the seams and cracks. So I get a lot of research done when I listen as I'm driving and doing other household tasks. But then I did make it to the Lovesac store and picked up a physical copy of your book, which is even better, I think, because you're missing out on all of the pictures and all of these great things that you don't get from the audiobook, but there's some treasures in the physical copy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a strange book. I read all these business books, so I tried to create something that's unique and, not to be found elsewhere.
And then you're also a dad of 4, 3 girls and a boy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to dive a little bit into your family life. And yeah, tell me a little bit about your kids. They're a little bit older now. So you've had more experience as a dad than I. My oldest is almost 5. But yeah, what was that like? Where does fatherhood fit into your story as a CEO?
Man, my life as a father kind of parallels my life building the business. My oldest now is 15. So I have 15-year-old daughter, 13-year-old son, and then 11 and 9-year-old daughters. And so three daughters, and all of them were born in Connecticut when Lovesac was out there, having relocated there from our home in Utah, where we started the company, because we had to live through a complete Chapter 11 reorganization as a business. And it was terrifying and humiliating and embarrassing. And in the wake of all of that, it would have been about, I guess, almost 8 or 9 years into the business since it was started as a side hustle in college. I'm also having kids. Every 2 years, my wife is adamant that we try to have a close family. And so starting in 2008, 10, 12, 14, right in the thick of probably the busiest time in my life. Besides the business, I was also involved in a lot of things with my church. I was also, toward the end of that time frame, pursuing a master's degree and then later teaching at a university in Manhattan. And so it was just a gnarly, thick, difficult, crazy time. I was, I think, traveling to Asia 4 or 5 times a year. I was probably traveling in general about 50% of the time. My wife had no help from other family, etc., while we were living in Stanford, because all of our extended family was back in Utah. And we spent a decade out there raising these kids kind of on our own. My wife even more on her own to some degree while I was traveling. And in those seams and cracks of being home on weekends or whenever I could be home, trying to be as good a father as I possibly could, trying to be as engaged, trying to be not tired, trying to change a lot of diapers, make a lot of bean burritos, all the things that I could possibly do to help my wife out, who was just such an amazing partner through all of this.
That's great. Yeah, it takes such a team. I'm so blessed to have my wife, and her and I both work. So we both try to balance each of our jobs. But like at the end of the day, like our priority is to our family and to our kids. And but yeah, it's hard when you're seeing a vision and you're trying to see your vision through no matter what area of your career you're in, but it's awesome that I've talked to so many people like yourself that are doing all of these things, but like they love being a dad at the heart of it. And that's kind of like what inspired me to start the podcast, is just to hear from people. You get all of their business books, you get all of their like advice on life, but how does family life fit into all of that? And yeah, so it's great talking to you just about that. Yeah, when you first became a dad, I want to kind of turn back the clock like 15 years and ask like what that moment was like. Um, you had been running your company for several years before that, but now you're in this new role. How was it different? In what ways like were the challenges the same, and in what ways were the challenges unexpected now that you're a father?
Nothing can prepare you to be a parent. And, it doesn't really come with an instruction manual. It's funny, you don't need a license. You need a license to buy to at least drive a car. Uh, 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 you need a business license to get into business. But any idiot can have a kid. And so thankfully, this idiot just approached it, I think, like everything else in life, which is just to jump in with both feet and do my best. And at that time, like I said, it was probably the busiest, hardest time in my life. And I've reflected on that a lot. Like, it's interesting to me. Like, so as a person of faith, who believes in God, believes in, you know, there's a plan to all this, etc. It's interesting to me that for most people, I think it's kind of the human condition that we are thrust into fatherhood, parenthood during the hardest time. We're trying to start a career, we're trying to feed our family, we're trying to make some money, we're trying to get ahead, we're maturing, we're wrestling with our own, development, hormones, growth, uh, manhood, whether that begins at 18 or some young age for some
Yeah.
people, or whether it happens in your 20s or even 30s. In any of those moments, I think it's still like a crucible of activity that we're expected just to uh, juggle being a father, especially in today's day and age, where, I think a lot more is expected than in times past. Thankfully, I think that dads, if I read my history right, sometimes it was just about, siring a son, and then, the rest was
Mhm.
left to mothers and grandparents. In this day and age, a father is, I think, expected to carry equal weight, or at least, their share of the load for sure, in parenting. And of course, we don't just have to, we get to, and it's such a blessing, but it's hard. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know why that's the case, but my speculation, if there is a plan to all this, and if it's meant to be this way, because this is one thing I wrestle with again. Let me come back to that. I'll build on it. I know people who, life didn't lead them to a marriage or a successful marriage or to children at that stage. They make a bunch of money, they retire, and now they're raising they get to be this active father in their 40s or 50s. And that's an interesting dynamic. At the same time, while, or by the way, some people have a child very late in life, and they get this
Mhm.
chance to kind of in a different stage in life when they're a little bit more set up, when they're a little bit more stable, to be a father. And I think that's a beautiful
Yep.
thing. All I know is my story. And in my case, like so many others, it was difficult and thick and hard and busy when I was thrust into being a father. And and I think that there is some meaning in that. I think that the reality is life is hard. I think it's kind of meant to be hard. I think it's meant to put us through that refiner's fire. And being a father is a major piece of that. And in fact, it becomes, and it should become, I think, the most important piece of it. And so I don't have a good answer as to why it's that way, but it's that way for most around the world, I think. And I think we just need to embrace it and roll with it and accept it. And our kids don't get to see us, 12 hours a day and spend all this quality time with us because we're out earning money, we're out building, we're out growing. And I think we're meant to do that to some degree and to juggle this. And I don't know, those are my reflections. So at that time, it was difficult, it was hard, but I jumped in with both feet and did my best.
Yeah. May I ask, what age were you when you had your first daughter?
I was 31 years old when
Okay.
we had our first child. And so, late by some standards, late by Mormon standards. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Sometimes we get accused of being married very young and starting families very young, and that happens. In my case, that's kind of late. I think probably pretty average these days, in terms of timing, and
Yeah.
and and probably would have been well on into my career were it not for the fact that Lovesac had just been through a really hard time. We'd just been forced to relocate the company to Connecticut out of our home from Utah. So it was just a tough time, and I'm glad that we survived. And of course, looking back, those are very precious years. And that's the trick, right? Is to
Yeah.
try not to wish it away. It's so easy to be looking forward to, well, if I could just make this kind of money, or we could just pay this off, or if we could just get into the next place, or we could just, afford a bigger car, whatever it is. And meanwhile, if we're not careful, we are inadvertently wishing away
Yeah.
these precious years of our kids' lives, of our life as a father. And once they're gone, they're gone. That stat that gets shared a lot right now, by the time they're 18, you've spent 90% of the time you're ever going to spend with them. And you
Yeah.
only got 10% left for the whole balance of their life, of your life with theirs. You only have 10% left of that time. And so how are you engaged in that 90%? Are you engaged? Are you wishing it away because of outside factors, like money and things like that? And we all do it. I think, at least I believe we all do it. And I try hard to fight against that.
Yeah, time goes by so fast. Like I'm 30 now. And so if I did the math right, I was like 25 when my first daughter was born. And yeah, now I have three kids in just that short amount of time. And already, like, my daughter's almost going to be in kindergarten. I'm like, wow, where did all the time go?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel so blessed to have this opportunity to be a dad and like to still pursue all these other things. And in a lot of ways, I feel like not my new experience as a father has made me a better man and a better like employee and worker and coworker and friend. And it's just like infuse the way that I see the world and the things that I value and the way that like I see other people and like what I want them to accomplish. So I feel so blessed for the opportunity now, that it's not just like compartmentalized, but it's like fully engulfed, like just like who I want to represent and become. And one of your, you call them Shawnisms, but these lessons that you share in your book, one of them kind of goes against the notion of the, well, it's a sort of a different approach than the fake it till you make it kind of philosophy. But I like yours better. You say, be what you will be, not what you are.
Yeah.
And you were proving that in your company, when you had little Lovesac, like going out and trying to build relationships. And I think at one point you mentioned you had a partnership with Red Bull at some events. And it's like you have this huge multi-million-dollar company and you wanted to be in the same space. But instead of being like, well, I won't, I need to wait until I can get to that point. I will like just always kind of putting that off to the future. Like you just did what you wanted to
Right.
be. um,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
you
that's
took orders. You never said like, well, we don't have a factory. We don't have like all these things in place. And in a way you said yes, and then found the way to make it happen. And I think the point I wanted to make with fatherhood, as you said, you don't get a manual. You kind of just get thrown into it. But in a lot of ways, like everyone's learning, and the only way to grow is to just dive in and
yeah.
be what you hope to be.
If you're listening to this podcast, then you're already ahead of the game. You're trying, you're making an effort. Like any idiot can be a father, it doesn't take that much. But, to be a dad, to be a great um, uh, father to children, to raise children, that takes some work and some effort if you like anything in life. And so in terms of this idea of be what you will be, not what you are. Yeah, when the call came through from, the biggest retailer in the United States wanting 12,000 little Lovesacks, my behavior, my tone of voice, my response was, yeah, we're the best not beanbag company in the world. And it wasn't a lie. We were probably the only not beanbag company in the world at that time, making foam bags, whatever. But I tried to speak like it, dress like it, act like it, behave like it, and ultimately it became true. I think the same can be true for fatherhood. Just imagine for 1 minute what a great dad looks like. And when I say that, I mean that metaphorically, how they act, how they speak, how they behave, how they interact with their children, how they show up, the energy level, the commitment, the decision making. Okay, act like that. Be what you will be, not what you are. You might be a scrub who's barely hanging on financially, mentally, spiritually, emotionally in our 20s or 30s, who knows? But you can choose to be what you will be, not just what you are. And especially as a father, we only get in the reality, back to the human condition, we may only get these precious times after work, in the evenings, on the weekends, maybe, to interface with our children. In the mornings, waking up to help out, making breakfast, whatever it may be. Okay, how are you in those moments? How do you show up? Are you being that great father, or are you just being you? In this day and age, it's really popular to be like, well, that's just how I am. That's just who I am. I don't believe that. We can be anything we want to be. It sounds trite, it sounds like self-helpy, but it's absolutely true. It starts with a choice. And look, I fall short every day, which is why, I have certain things I try to do to keep myself in line, a morning mantra, a morning routine, because I'm always falling short. I'm always a little bit tired. I'm always a little bit, less engaged, less present than I probably should be, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to become that. And the best part is when you try on a consistent basis, things will become a habit. And the things that you were weak at you will almost inadvertently become strong, and then you'll be even more aware of other weaknesses and shortcomings you have, let's say as a father, because you've leveled up, and you'll
Yeah.
always be chasing it. And then by the time you arrive anywhere, your kids will probably be leaving the house, and you've lost your chance. So you better be trying, otherwise
Yeah.
it will escape you.
Yeah. Shawn, do you have a mantra? Like if you were to summarize like Shawn philosophy, taking your Shawnisms or whatever and putting a mantra kind of thing together as a father, what would that be?
Well, there's a number of ways I can answer that, but I'll start with I wear, my wedding ring, which has evolved over time. I have this newer one that came after we had the 4 kids, and it has these 6 black diamonds in it. And of course, it represents me and my wife and my 4 children. And on the inside of this ring, there's an inscription, and it's one of the Shawnisms that I share in the book and I expound on in the book. Let me save you 25 years. Is this Shawnism called everything else is dust. And it's referring to everything else aside from these 6 souls, including my own mental well-being, physical well-being as a provider, especially my wife's. She comes first, even before the kids. It's something I believe. And I know that's heretical to say in this day and age. It almost sounds like abrasive to what, your kids don't come first? Listen, I believe when we put our spouse, our partner first, it has the best impact on the kids. They know it, they feel it, they grow up in an environment of love. It's easy for parents to, in the name of our children, neglect our spouse, even roll our eyes, or, you know, uh, argue in the extreme case, fight, disagree openly. etc. And it's not to say that my wife and I don't disagree, but I think that we make a strong effort to be aligned, especially in front of the children, and to truly be aligned, to truly like love each other, care about each other, put the other's needs first. And when that happens, I believe it has the most profound effect on the kids, more than any amount of attention or love I could give them directly. Now, of course, it's not to say we neglect our children. I'm just saying that's my priority. And then, of course, the other four members of this little clan, um, and that makes the six diamonds. But I try to remind myself daily, everything else is dust. Now you're looking at a person who likes things. I collect old cars, I drive them, I dirt bike, we boat, we ski, we do all this stuff, we have stuff, we do stuff, but it's all dust. It's all garbage compared to these six souls. And if we accidentally let these things, I share a very personal story in the book where my dad berated me for losing a gas cap. And at the time, and of course it was just one of these things that happens, in our life. But I doubt what he intended was to make me feel less important than his precious locking gas cap that I left on the bumper and it fell off and was lost. But that's how it made me feel at this stupid age of 13. Because, we're undeveloped and we don't process everything and we can't look at things with perspective because we don't have any perspective at 13. And if we're not careful, we can have those kinds of effects on our children. And so whenever anything is broken, lost, scratched, dented, destroyed, I try very, very hard to pump my brakes. Remember, that thing is just garbage. That thing is dust. That thing is unimportant compared to my relationship with my. Now, it doesn't mean I won't teach them a lesson. It doesn't mean I won't try to call it to their attention that, they should be careful, that they should treat things carefully. Why should they treat things carefully? Because, you tie it back to work and effort and time away from home. Even, that's going too far probably for a kid. But my point is, it's important to teach our children, but not at the emotional expense of damaging them. And so keeping all this stuff in perspective, it's one of my most important Shawnisms that I try to live by and remember. All this other stuff is dust. And we don't want to accidentally, put it ahead of the relationships we have, especially with our spouse and children.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think everything in proper priority. And I think, as you said, a lot of people focus so much on their kids, which is a good thing, but they lose sight of their spouse, this person that they were first called to love. And I think that our expression of love with our spouse is a witness to our kids in the way that like we are to love in the way that they're loved. And it's a challenge too. Like if I'm doing something for my wife and helping out and or whatever it is, like my kids see that and it's like, okay, like dad is there, he's present, like this is a team, like we're all together, we've created this family at home, we're all part of that. And then so it's not this like sort of ode mentality that parents sometimes get into, where like everything kind of focus around the kids and like even the weekends are prioritized like around the kids' soccer and all these other kinds of activities. And we get busy. And I'm sure like as my kids get older, there'll be all sorts of obligations that we'll have. But we make an effort, like in our family, church is important to us. And so we take time to pray as a family. We take time to go to church on the weekends. And then everything kind of falls in line around those things that we first prioritized, but then also making time to do the fun things as a family, to travel and to do different events and things. But yeah, I completely agree with what you were saying about like you have to put things in perspective.
Absolutely. And look, it's tricky. It's hard. You get the chance as a father to be, uh, you know, uh, I'll say it this way, the CEO of your family, and maybe it's a co-CEO, of course, with your wife or spouse or what partner, whatever. Um, But there's a reason CEOs get paid a lot of money. It's because it's hard to be a CEO and you have to make tough decisions and it's hard. And you say, well, what's the right decision? Like, oh my gosh, like, my kids' soccer games or my wife's this. I can't answer that for you, but I will say this. If you are really honest with yourself, if you're honest with yourself and you're being honest with yourself and you're really trying to view, your decisions on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, through the lens of honesty, you know if you're kind of being a little bit neglectful of your spouse, or if you're kind of dodging your kids because you're tired, and that can happen on a daily basis, minute to minute basis. And I would challenge you to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Be honest. If you've fallen short, if you've made mistakes, start now. Start in the next moment, shutting the laptop, turning off the phone, trying to engage, and then, uh, scold yourself silently when you find yourself drifting back to your phone in front of your kids. And it's hard. These things are hard, but that's why they pay you the big bucks. And I'm joking, right? You don't get paid for being a father. But what's wild isn't it more important? You might get paid a lot in whatever your professional role is. I'm the CEO of a public company. My duties as a father are more important. Do I act like that? Now, a lot of people are counting on me and it's tricky. Shawn, how do you then, what? You don't show up, you go to every kid's everything and you never show up as a CEO? No, because by the way, if I fail at that, I can't provide. But sometimes we hide, sometimes we dodge our kids in the name of, well, I'm making money for them. I'm doing this for them, aren't I? If you're really honest with yourself and you try to be honest with yourself every day, you can find ways to be a great father and a great earner, or whatever. And by the way, something's got to give. Like, maybe there are sacrifices you'll make in your career. Right now, for instance, I'm often, as an entrepreneur, I'm often compelled to invest in this, get involved in that, advise, sit on a board, take on this, be part of this, start this other side hustle. And part of my morning mantra that I read to myself reminds me not to do that. It doesn't mean that, I don't have investments. I have, I'm trying to diversify. I'm trying to, build a retirement, whatever. But a lot of that's just passive. And I'm trying not to be a serial entrepreneur. What? Isn't that kind of unambitious, Shawn? Look, my ambitions for Lovesac are huge. I think we can build it into a multi-billion dollar company. But if I'm trying to do that and I'm trying to do one or two other startups and I'm trying to be a good dad, look, some things got to give. And so I choose to forego most of those opportunities, almost all of them, in the name of, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And that's all I'm going to do. And look, maybe it won't make me a billionaire, but I've known plenty of billionaires and 100 millionaires, and many of them would, if pushed, to be honest, trade places with me, to be on their first wife, to have children that know them and like them. What's that worth?
Yeah, I think, as you said, like we have so many blessings right in front of us sometimes. And like we can kind of get caught up in chasing like the next thing, especially like when it comes to money. Like people see like, oh, if I had a bigger house, like extra zero in my bank account, all these things would be easy. And we neglect like the blessings that are right in front of us sometimes. And as you said, there's people who make far more than I do, even more than you do. And like they're still not happy, and they might not have the blessings that I look at every day and say, like, I get to wake up with my kids. My daughters are telling me every day, Daddy, I love you. And they're excited when I get to come home at 5 o'clock. Like all of those things, I just like, I have to remind myself, like, as much as I want like all of these things and hopefully to be able to provide for them, like to be thankful for what I have every day.
And by the way, on the other side of that, when they're gone and they're doing their own thing and you're proud of them, who are you left with? You're left with
Yeah.
yourself, how you feel about yourself. You're left with your spouse. And then you
Yeah.
might have another 30, 40 years to kill without
Yeah.
any of those little blessings on a daily basis. So don't wish them away, even though you're in the thick of it. And it's hard to do, because we all are feeling the pressure, and let me share one other anecdote that's interesting because they're hard to come by. I had a friend who made a ton of money and retired very young, like in his early 40s, still has, all of his kids at home. And I'm really jealous. It's like, oh man, maybe I should, like if my family really matters to me, maybe that's what I should do. Find a way to do that. Then I could spend all my time with them. But the reality is you can't. They got to go to school. They got to do their
Yeah.
thing. They got to be on their own. So now, he rides his bike a lot. And he's actually told me one time, it was really interesting. He pulled me aside and sent me a note and told me, I kind of admire where you're at because Shawn, you seem to be able to spend a lot of time with your family. You try to prioritize that, but you're building something. He said, my kids don't see me work. And I'm worried about what that might do to them and their own work ethic or their own perception about reality and about life. So if we so love our family, shouldn't we just spend all of our time with them? I don't think so. I don't think that's really the plan. I think there's a reason, when Adam and Eve left the garden, they were commanded to they would have to eat by the sweat of their own brow. I think that it's part of the plan. I think it would be nice for any of us to inherit a bunch of money and to then be financially secure, or by the way, just earn a bunch of money young and be financially secure so we can spend all our time with our family. Would we? Or would we be, chasing another condo here or there and trying to navigate the renters who trash the place while we're building our inheritance that we got? You know what I mean? Would we actually spend all that time on our family? I don't know that we would. I'd like to believe that. My point being, I think for most people, the vast, vast majority of people, this situation we're thrust into where we've got to work hard even as we're trying to not wish it away is the crucible we're meant to live in to develop into more godly creatures ourselves. And that's you don't become stronger, better, faster. You don't become a smoother stone without rolling down the hill and having your rough edges knocked off. And I think so that's my own meandering uh I don't know, contemplation on this harsh reality that we live in, but it's what I believe.
Yeah. I like that philosophy too, where like, you're always like being open. You have in the book being an avid learner and a continuous learner. And I think as much as I think being at home would be great, I know there's a certain aspect. I love what I do. I work in video production and I love it. I've been with the same company for almost 9 years and we've made all these amazing video series. And my wife loves being a social worker and
Hmm.
she works full time, like in her organization. So together, like we come home and we're re-energized by the work that we do and being able to share that with our kids and hopefully inspire them to go out and see whatever their dream through. And like that's what I love about Girl Dad Nation too, is like there was a lot of pressure on my wife when we had our kids to then leave everything and just be a stay-at-home mom.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with stay-at-home mothers. Like that's a blessing in itself. And there's many people that are called to that. But I was like super supportive of my wife wanting to continue on with the work that she was doing. And like, and at this stage where my daughters are super young and the whole world is available to them, I love having conversations with so many different people and so many different backgrounds and like showing them like there's all these different things available to them. And at the core of like what my wife and I are called to is being a father and a mother. And that's beautiful. But I love just how people can balance that. And it's not like it doesn't have to be this or that. And I even see this like in the workplace. I love that kind of workplace culture is being more open to family life. And like I bring my kids to the office fairly often. And I love that we're being, like, as a culture, more open to these things to make it work so that, like, it's not so compartmentalized in these different areas. And that my kids can really see, like, all these good things out in the world and find their own purpose.
I agree. And by the way, there's not one right answer. I have a friend who's a stay-at-home dad,
Yeah.
and in a way, I'm kind of jealous of that. Like I talk a good game, but if I were really committed, I would have sold all my stock in Lovesac and just been there.
Yeah.
I don't know, because by the way, that's not me. Like I don't know, even if I had done that, if I would be there more than I am now, because I'm not maybe wired that way, where my friend maybe is wired that way. And by the way, I think women, this is a really tough thing, I think, for a lot of women, wrestling with, well, I feel guilt because I'm not out there working if I'm a stay-at-home mom, or I feel guilt because I am out there working because I really
Yeah.
just, but we need the money. We can't survive without it. I don't have the right answer. I think we have to do what we have to do to survive. That's the cold hard reality. Some of us were meant to be stay-at-home parents, some of us were not. But regardless, if you get the chance to choose, if you have the opportunity to choose, it's a personal choice. And I think there isn't a right answer.
Yeah.
I think, to your point, your wife may be a better mom because she goes to work and has that, you know, experience and success than she would be if she were a stay-at-home mom resenting, her bratty children or something like that. Right. And I don't know your wife, but my point is that I think that people have to feel that out for themselves and be honest with themselves. And the rough part is when you can't even make the choice. You are forced, as a single parent or as a dual income home, that you are forced to make decisions just to survive. And in that case, I empathize. And I think, like, welcome to your cold, hard reality,
Yeah.
but take it on, accept it, and do your best. And that's, I think, all we're asked to do. I think we were all raised by parents who, unbeknownst to us, were facing probably a lot of the exact same decisions and challenges. We were just aloof to it. We are just dumb kids. And by the way, God bless them for keeping us in the dark and letting us live a happy, childhood.
Yeah. So we're coming up, unfortunately, towards the end of our time, but yeah, just kind of thinking of the future and everything. Yeah, your daughters are, your oldest, you said, is 15. So, um, they're closer to being on their own, out of the house in a couple more years than mine are. But yeah, they're doing amazing things. I know that you ski and you dirt bike and you're doing all these great things. Um, yeah, could you share just kind of what are the ways that you are encouraging your daughters? Um, like, what things are they passionate about? How
Yeah.
do you encourage that? And then, like, what lesson, like, do you hope that they take with them, as they're
Yeah.
adults?
Yeah. Look, I'm really proud of my daughters. They all speak Mandarin Chinese. I speak Mandarin. I served a mission for my church there, learned the language. We found schools that do half day immersion. That's pretty cool. They all play instruments. They all play the piano. They all are studying the guitar as well. And my oldest is kind of a virtuoso at the piano for sure, and a songwriter. The rest of them are doing okay, and that's fine. I think that music is a very powerful skill. I think that it wrinkles the brain in ways that other things don't. They've taken dance, they've done all kinds of different lessons, jujitsu, along the way. I think one of the things I'm passionate about. We all ski as a family, and I think that's good for a family. It's something you can do together, and water sports, we're into that as well. So we're into a lot of things, I'm just a person who's always been into a lot of things. And so I guess for better or for worse, that's the reality that our kids are being raised in. At the same time, we pulled them out of a lot. They're not doing everything. They've done different things along the way, and we've dropped different things in the pursuit of having some free time and letting them be kids. They're not just going from one class to the next and the next. There's a little bit of that, but not as much as you'd think, because we've allowed them to abandon things that they're not. They're good at all these things, dance and singing and performing and whatever. But like, you have to choose. There's only so many hours in a day, and if you don't, you'll be eaten alive, especially with multiple kids, as a taxi running them around. And by the way, that could take its toll. And if you're not careful, that could take its toll on your core relationship with your spouse. So be careful. I would advise you to be careful of that. But somewhere in there, there's a place where it works for your family. Lastly, I've tried to lure them all into dirt biking. Dirt biking, as dumb as it sounds, riding motorcycles is something that I've only gotten into in my 40s, but I became fascinated with it because it's so demanding, particularly off-road. And the only reason I'm talking about it is it doesn't have to be dirt biking, but I've found it's not something I can do for them. I can kind of do it with them, but they're on their own two wheels. They're going to tip over. They're going to fall. They're going to get hurt a little bit. They're going to have to be brave, because to really ride a dirt bike on trails, you have to drop off of ledges. You have to
Yeah.
climb up things that are very steep and threatening and sometimes not make it, and then deal with the terror of not making it and then surviving it and picking up the heavy motorcycle and getting back out of the dirt and maybe a few tears. But there are lessons in all of that. There are lessons in all of that. My daughter just fell on her face the other day, riding, trying to follow us on a trail. And she got back up and was, you know, a mess and crying. And I thought, uh-oh, this might be it. And you wait to see, can she get back on? And when she does, because by the way, there's no other way back to the car, like you kind of have to. And then very next day, she did her first race, completed 16 miles against bigger kids. Again, ended in tears. She's a bit emotional, but it's one of the cool. Now you ask her about it, just a little bit of space. One of the things she's most proud of in life. And so find ways that can naturally and in a fun way push your kids way out of their comfort zone. Put them in positions that bring them to the brink,
Yeah.
hopefully without damaging them, without crushing them. Um, and I believe they'll be stronger for it. And in my case, dirt biking has played a role in that, as crazy as that sounds. So, but there's other ways, and it's what I believe in. And I'm very proud of these girls. And I look forward to seeing, what they do with their own lives. And they're all, as anyone who has multiple children knows, these are individuals from the moment they are born. They are born with their individual spirits and their individual energy. And it's so satisfying. What a blessing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing better in life.
Yeah. I love that. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And like for people out there that are like, yeah, where do I even start? I love the very first thing in your book is just do something.
Just
And
do
you
something. We
and
have
dirt,
ideas every
yeah.
day. These ideas flow
Yeah.
through your mind like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we went hiking? Plan it,
Yeah.
book the gig, look it up, like take like these ideas that you have as a father. They might not even just be your ideas. They might be
Yeah.
inspiration. Take advantage of that inspiration and do something. I agree
Yeah.
100%.
So whether it's for yourself or your kids, like get that book, take that class, get your kids on a team of some kind.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like get out there and then do the next thing.
Do
And
the next
then
thing.
just
Yeah. So all
continue
of these
to
are, thanks for
encourage.
quoting Shawn.
Yeah.
These are Shawnisms from the book. My podcast, Let Me Save You 25 Years. We go deep into every one of these Shawnisms each week. And you know, and none of it, look, all the proceeds from my book are donated to the Future Business Leaders of America, a nonprofit. My podcast has no advertisers. I'm just putting it out there to be useful. But the fact that you're even listening to stuff like this, I think, shows that you have a desire to be better at being a dad, let's say. And that's only a good thing. I mean, that's a great thing. Now just pair that with a little bit of action. Number one,
Yeah.
Shawnism, just do something. And then number two, just do the next thing. And you're on your way.
Yeah, that's so great. Shawn, it's so awesome to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being a part of Girl Dad Nation. And yeah, I just did something. I listened to your podcast.
There we go.
Then I got your book. And then you never know until you ask. So I sent you an email and asked for you to be on the podcast. I'm so thankful that you said yes.
That's
So
right.
to wrap up this interview, I want to give you a special opportunity. Pretend like I'm not here. Want to give you an opportunity to leave a special message directly to your kids.
Oh, all right. Lucky, Duke, Pepper, and Valentine. You are the most important thing in my life next to your mother. And even though I don't get to spend all of my time with you, and sometimes when I'm with you, I can be distracted or annoyed or who knows what. There is nothing on earth I love more than you. And I'm grateful to have been given the opportunity to be your father. And I take it very seriously, even though I come up short every day, probably every other moment of every day, but I'm trying. And I thank you for your patience and love.
Thank you so much for my audience. Please follow Girl Dad Nation. I'm on social media at GirlDadNation. And if you love this episode, share it with a friend. Until next time, go be a dad.